flank steak is wildly popular because it's easy to just throw on the grill for a quick summer meal. Isn't that right, Lawman?
That's right, Julia. But this steak is not without its problems. There's a thick side and a thin side, and they very rarely cook evenly. But today we're gonna solve that problem.
All right.
Now first, I have 2 pounds of flank steak. I'm gonna pat dry.
Not a lot of other prep needs to go on with a flank steak. It's pretty much buy it and cook it.
That's right. Typically a steak like this, people wanna marinate it. But marinade is the enemy of good browning. Plus here at the test kitchen, we found that a marinade only penetrates the surface of the steak.
That's right. And marinades also often contain an acid, like lemon juice or vinegar. And that acid actually breaks down the muscle fibers in the steak, so it turns it mushy, not tender.
We're actually gonna put a dry rub on the steak, starting with 2 teaspoons of sugar, ½ teaspoon of salt, and a ½ teaspoon of pepper.
I like how you're mixing them all together. Makes it easier to sprinkle over the meat.
Exactly. You only have to sprinkle it once. I'm sprinkling it from high so that it gets all over the meat.
It actually looks like a fair amount of seasoning you're putting on there.
Yes, now the salt and the sugar put on the steak far enough in advance is gonna dissolve and penetrate deep within the meat, unlike the marinade, which only penetrates the surface. Now we're gonna place it on a plate and cover it with plastic wrap, and we're gonna refrigerate it for a minimum of 1 hour up to 24 hours. Now the longer the meat gets to sit, the more flavorful it's gonna be.
And what happens if you go longer than 24 hours by chance?
It's gonna be too salty.
All right.
I'm just gonna throw this in the fridge. So Julia, the grill's been heating for 15 minutes. It's nice and hot. So before we start, I'm gonna clean the grill.
Ooh, you can see the heat coming off that grill. You're not messing around.
First, I'm gonna scrape the grates. And now I'm gonna oil the grates.
And when you do this, it's best to use vegetable or canola oil because it will polymerize onto the grates and create a nonstick surface. And sometimes you'll see little drips of oil will drop down and cause little flare-ups. Totally fine.
Now we can grill. Because this steak has a thick end and a thin end, it's very hard to cook it evenly. So we're gonna use a method where we have a hot side of the grill and a cool side of the grill. So I'm gonna leave the primary burner on and turn off all the other burners. You're gonna be tempted to pat it dry, but you don't want to. The sugar's gonna caramelize and brown and give the steak great flavor. Now to make sure that sugar caramelizes, we're gonna take the entire steak and put it on the hot side of the grill for 2 minutes per side. It's been 2 minutes, Julia. Now we can check on our steak. I'm just gonna flip it, and it's gonna go for another 2 minutes. Julia, it's been 2 more minutes. We're gonna check on our steak.
Looks good.
Now we're gonna flip and rotate the steak so that the thin end is on the cool side of the grill. And we're gonna continue to cook this for 2 to 6 minutes, flipping every 2 minutes until the thick side reaches 125 degrees for medium rare. It's been 2 minutes. We're gonna check on our steak. We're gonna flip it.
Beautiful.
Nice and brown.
Yeah. Still keeping that thick end over the hot side of the fire.
Now we're gonna take its temperature, and we're putting it in the thicker side, looking for 125 degrees. And we're right there. It's perfect.
Nicely done. So depending on how thick your steak was, could take up to 4 minutes longer.
Exactly. Now you're gonna notice we transferred to a wire rack instead of a cutting board right now. We wanna let the steak rest for 10 minutes, and if any of the juices leak out, we don't want it to pool and get rid of any of the browning that we've accomplished.
Yeah, I have to say, this has a gorgeous brown crust. That's hard to get on a thin piece of meat like this.
Exactly. That sugar helped that out. Now we're gonna tent it with foil and bring it inside. Julia, the steak's been resting for a few minutes. Now we have time to make our dressing. I'm gonna start with chopping some basil. We want about a 1/4 cup. I like to chop the basil at the end of the recipe so that it doesn't oxidize and turn brown. To that, we're gonna add a 1/4 cup of extra virgin olive oil, 1 shallot chopped fine, 2 tablespoons of red wine vinegar, 2 teaspoons of lemon juice, 1 teaspoon of honey, 1 garlic clove minced, ½ teaspoon of salt, ½ teaspoon of red pepper flake, and 1/4 teaspoon of pepper.
Oh, that looks good.
The meat has been resting for 10 minutes. Now it's time to slice. Now, normally a steak like this would be unwieldy to slice thin. We have a solution for that. We're gonna make 2 smaller steaks by first cutting the steak in half with the grain. And now we're gonna cut the smaller steak on the bias, very thin, about 1/4 inch.
Look how perfectly cooked that steak is. I mean, it has a perfect pinkness all the way through, from the thick end to the thin end. That's really hard to do. Oh, Look at that gorgeous steak.
Now I'm going to add that delicious basil dressing on it.
Lawman, that is beautiful. That looks really elegant. I mean, that's company worthy right there.
It is, thank you. All that marinade flavor is on the steak. Now it's time to eat.
Gorgeous.
Nice and tender.
The flank steak is super tender. That salting overnight, especially if you can do it for a day, really does magic with the texture of the meat.
Great char on it.
And I love this basil dressing. It really does sort of brighten up the meat, so it tastes summery.
It is a really good dressing.
Lawman, this is delicious. Thank you.
You're welcome, Julia.
If you want to make this easy recipe for grilled flank steak, season the meat with salt, pepper, and sugar, and refrigerate it for at least an hour. Grill over a 2-level fire and flip it every 2 minutes. To serve, slice the steak against the grain and drizzle with a simple basil vinaigrette. From Cook's Country, a foolproof recipe for grilled flank steak with basil dressing.
Thanks for watching Cook's Country from America's Test Kitchen. So what'd you think?
Leave a comment and let us know which recipes you're excited to make, or just say hi.
Now you can find links to today's recipes and reviews in the video description.
And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.
See you later.
Alligator.